I think we've covered a lot. We've talked about Generation C, and I will take you back 100 years in time to what we have discovered then and what we've reintroduced. Jim already took some of my lines away. He even made it a bit more sexy about me introducing this system back into US. We're not far away from that, but I certainly want to talk you to what we've been doing and why we believe the auction clock has a role in our systems of distributing our products. Where do I have the... Does it work? Where do I point? Here I am. All right, this is the brief agenda for today. An introduction on the company, the history of ZON, then I'll take you back of where we once started, the go-to-market strategy, and why we brought back the auction clock, and a small wrap-up. Before I do, let me introduce myself, or let me take it one step back, introduce myself. I've been working in produce on and off. I joined in 96 a big company in produce, was a marketing director. But before and afterwards, I worked for American companies. I worked with Procter & Gamble in Russia and Scandinavia. I worked with the H.J. Heinz company in the Netherlands and in Scandinavia. And for 7 years, I've been running a processed vegetable company in the Netherlands, an iconic brand, similar a bit to what you got a Green Giant here in the US, or Bonduelle for the ones that know the French brand. So I know a little bit about vegetables, and 2 years ago, I joined ZON. Some key facts. It was founded 100 years ago, and it's one of the leading horticultural cooperatives in the Netherlands. It's a cooperative. I very much talk today about the perspective of the grower, and also about our customers, but I work and I'm paid by the grower. So whatever I say, you should look from the perspective of the grower, and Jim already alluded to that a little bit. We got a broad assortment. We got open field products, leek. We're big in asparagus. We got greenhouse products, bell peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes. We also got some soft fruits, blueberries and strawberries. In last year, our turnover was about $350 million. We realized that we had 250 growers, and we got about 130 employees. With that, our production in the Netherlands is anywhere between 10 to 50% of the total production. And one should remember that the Dutch production is fully focused on export. 90% of what we produce in agriculture in general, but also in horticultural business, is for export. We are one of the biggest exporters, certainly relative to what we consume at home versus what we export. We have about 10 to 50%. In asparagus, we got about 30%, and in some of the other products a little bit less, but overall it's about that number. And what's important is, and I'll talk about that very later, and it's also key, we own our own industrial park, very close to the biggest market in Europe, Germany. This is our structure. As I said, we got on top, we got the cooperative, there's 250 members. The cooperative owns ZON Holding, which is the marketing and sales entity, which I, together with the CFO, lead. We got a supervisory board, 5 growers, with 2 external supervisory members and non-exec directors give guidance to the company. We've got 3 operations. The vegetable business on the left-hand side and the bottom. In the middle, we got the soft fruit business, and we got the real estate business. I will skip that because of time. You've seen this. This is more than 8 seconds. This is more than a minute. This is 2 minutes and 39 seconds. And I think by the time of now, you will do it. But it will basically introduce you to what kind of activities we do. We do, in general, all kinds of marketing and sales services. We provide financial services to our members. We do all kinds of added value activities like packaging, sorting, grading, etc., etc. But we also help our growers with a dedicated team on best agricultural practices, certifying, etc., etc., so we can compete and comply with the demands of the market and our customers. Oh, well, we'll skip that one. Can we go there? I don't want to show this. Yes. This is the last sheet about ZON today. On the horizontal axis, and I'm not sure whether you can see it, the lamp of the is not too great, but on the horizontal axis, you see brackets of turnover for a grower. So on the left-hand side, you see a segment in which is growers that are qualifying to do 10,000 euros or less per year, bringing to us. On the right-hand side, far on the right-hand side, we got growers that do 7.5 million euros or more. What you see is there's a big concentration anywhere between 50,000 and say 500,000, and we got only few growers that are really big. It's important to realize, as I said before, I'm here to serve the growers, and I got a quite diversified group, not only in size, as you can see, but also where you can see the red part of the bars are open field growers. The blue ones are greenhouses, which typically make more money. They've got a more valuable proposition to the market. And the smaller ones, the green ones, are soft fruit growers. So my task, the task of our organization, is to service the very small ones who have different demands, different needs, as well as the bigger ones. And I will come back to that in a minute. Okay, let me go back all the way. Our organization, our cooperative started more than 100 years ago, in 1915. And in fact, at that time, we did more with eggs than we did with vegetables. But one should remember at that time, growers were relatively small. They usually had some livestock, they had some vegetables and some other products, but this cooperative started out to sell eggs. It wasn't very much more than a marketplace, an open marketplace. And this is one of the earliest shots made at the time. They came from another cooperative. They were unhappy. They felt they weren't treated as good as some of the others, and so they moved to and basically established their own cooperative. And it was successful. More and more joined because they were successful in attracting buyers. And as you see with any marketplace, and certainly that marketplace, if you bring together the right product, you will attract buyers. More buyers will bring in better prices, etc., etc. And this is the way they grew. It did that well that in the 30s they built new facilities, and from our current standard that looks very poor, but I can assure you at that time it was very modern, and that's how they basically built the business and attracted more and more growers. At the pinnacle, we had more than 1,000 to 2,000 growers being member of the cooperatives. As I said, today it's only 250. They are much bigger, but still the number has gone down. And then my predecessors made a brilliant move in the 60s. At the start and well through the 60s, we were at the center of Venlo. A bit like the story of Hunts Point Market, I believe, is we were in the center of the city, in southeast parts of the Netherlands, but we were too big, and also the logistics at the time were difficult. So my predecessors bought 130 acres north of the city, at that time very much bare land, undeveloped, and that turned about in the last 50 years to be very successful. It's become a magnet for the region, for the horticultural business in the southeastern part of the Netherlands, where we are located. And that's important. Today, we house more than over 50 different companies. We got our buyers there. We got also marketing and sales organizations that do all kinds of activities, agencies, packaging companies, and a whole lot of other companies that are there. Directly during the normal times, there are about 1,500 employees. In the high season, in the summertime, when really the crop is coming in, there's about 3,000 people working at this location, and very much concentrated all the activities in this region. It is also very strategically located because it is very close to Germany. Out of Venlo, we can service about 30 million consumers. The Netherlands has about 60 million, so about 10 million in Belgium, and there is a whole lot of consumers in Germany. And Germany traditionally is the biggest export market for any product, any agricultural product in Europe. So everybody wants to be close to Germany, and where we are located is very suitable. I think our facilities are less than 2 miles from the German border and are well connected to the Rotterdam Port Harbor and other facilities also on rail. And that has certainly helped and drove our business over the years. The 1780s has basically been the pinnacle, I think, of the horticultural sector. All kinds of new developments, substrate growing, technology coming in, and I think the basis of that success was, and my colleague Gert already said something about it earlier today, is the collaborative working, the way Dutch work together. Universities, research institutes, the government, and the sector itself joined forces and developed a lot of the technology together. And with that, they strengthened the position of the Dutch grower, and with that, they strengthened the whole sector, and with that, a whole industry developed very prosperously. And so that has taken certainly through the 70s and well into the 80s to be a very successful and basically something the Dutch society was very proud of and often taken as example. A spin-off all the developments in greenhouses, the spin-off all the developments about climate control, all technologies. Also a very important seed industry has been developed in the Netherlands. I wouldn't say all of because of horticulture, but certainly the things being together and a very close vicinity helped the Dutch horticulture industry to grow significantly. That, however, kind of not ended, but certainly got a big challenge when in 1986 Spain entered the European Union. And with that, we got a fierce competitor. Maybe not at the start in '86, but certainly since then they've developed as a strong competitor. We got in the Netherlands about 4,500 hectares of greenhouses, glass houses, very sophisticated production units. What you see on this chart in the south of Spain, and you see the dot, that's where it's located, but in the south of Spain, this all is greenhouses, combined about 18,000 hectares. So, and the total of Spain, there's over 30,000 hectares of greenhouses. Now, they're not as sophisticated as the Dutch. The production is not as high as in Holland, but combined, they produce a whole lot of tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, and other greenhouse products. And with that, they've become a very fierce competitor, particularly on the German market, but also in other places. So that was one of the first things that we really were basically, for a long time, we were by ourselves. We kind of dominated the market, and then that all changed in 1986. Now, luckily, there's not a great overlap between their production season and ours, but there still is, and so we have to fight our way back in the spring. And then by the end of the year, around now, Spain basically provide and supply most of Europe with these vegetables. As already said, the auction clock has always been a very important instrument, and we have been doing that well before the Second World War. And we've developed it. At the start, it worked that there were different auctions in the Netherlands, and a buying organization would have different individuals sitting in different of these auctions with telephones, old-fashioned telephones, no mobiles, and there would be a central buyer in the office of the trader, and then he would contact constantly over the phone, and then the guy would be able to bid in one location and not in the other one, and that is how that all worked. And that has been worked very long until only in the start of this century a web-based clock was introduced, and that has kind of changed the industry, or changed the way we sold our products. Nowadays, with our facilities, we got about 150 buyers every day, of which only 40 are located physically where we are, in Venlo, and the other 100 do it from home or from their office or wherever they can do, because the whole structure is internet-based, and that makes it no longer needed to be physically present in Venlo, in the auction auditorium, where for a long time a lot of people have been sitting and buying and pushing for our product. That changed. I think that's important because in the Netherlands we've been very successful in standardizing product. So a buyer doesn't necessarily need to see the product. The specs are that narrowly defined that a buyer can basically blindly buy the product and don't have to see it. That's quite a different, for example, in Spain, where the buyers still are on location and really want to see what product they can buy, because there's a huge difference between one grower and the other one. In the Netherlands, we have kind of set national specs and kind of a good rigorous system to make sure that the buyers know what they get. And that has been helpful, and that makes it no longer needed for buyers to be locally, physically present at our location. There's one other thing I'd like to mention. We're very proud of that. Last year, the king, Willem-Alexander, our king, awarded us with the royal signature, a predicate. Only one company in every industry can get such a predicate. And we were very lucky to be the first to reach the 100 years. And so we are in the league with Royal Dutch the oil company, KLM, the airline company, and so in the league of companies that have been selected through a rigorous system and an audit by the royal family, the royal house, and they've given this award. So ever since then we can have this crown on our logo and have developed it and proudly wear that whatever we do. So I don't want to keep that away from you. The small side stuff. I talked about Spain and how that has an impact on our business. The other important thing that has changed our industry occurred also in the 80s, early 90s. And that was basically that the industry, the sector was moving away from being supply-driven, or was at least finding ways to move from supply-driven sector to demand-driven. And that was basically forced and happened through the retailers. The retailers came up and they were no longer happy with the system and the way it worked. They were not certain about the quality they always got. They were not certain about the price. They were not certain about the quantity. And they tried to find ways around the auctions, cooperatives to get product. And so this has been a very important development, and that has changed our industry significantly. I think together with Spain entering the European Union, these are very significant changes of which we as the cooperatives had to adapt to. As I said, up until the 80s, the supply chain was well structured. And this looks a little bit like the figure I saw just earlier with the panel discussion about what the other were presenting. We had a pretty much well-organized supply chain. On the left-hand side, you had the grower. The grower would bring his product to a cooperative like ours. We do all kinds of activities. Then there would be traders. They would be collecting product from one cooperative and the others, bring it together, bring in some tropical products, and then would bring it to the retailers. And that worked very well for a very long time, but not anymore. And so that's changed. And today's supply chain is a bit like this. Everybody is assuming different roles. Everybody's trying to get to the source, the grower, and everybody trying to figure out what his role is in the supply chain. And particularly the one in the middle, the cooperatives like ourselves, as well as the traders, have to find a way in which more and more growers want to go directly to the retailers because they want to understand the need, the demands of who they're selling to. And increasingly, retailers want to know where the product is coming from because they want to have certainty about the quality, they want to have certainty about quantity, they want to have certainty about doing all kinds of activities in which the two other parties not necessarily always contribute as much. This is, however, true mostly for the larger growers. As I already explained to you, I got a wide variety of growers being relatively small and relatively big. For the bigger growers, for the ones on the right-hand side, particularly the greenhouse growers, they are very much interested in dealing directly with the retail organizations and vice versa. They got scaled by now. Our biggest growers group has about 80 hectares of tomatoes, which represent the sales of about 35 million. And with that size, you can supply important customers as they do. They supply directly to Albert Heijn, say from Ahold in the Netherlands, and also to Aldi in Germany, and these are two big customers, high demand customers, but they got the size and they basically have fitted and organized their ways of working completely to the needs and the demands of these customers. However, I do have other growers who are much smaller and who is a big retailer like Albert Heijn is not interested in. The other thing which is interesting is that while in the 80s, 90s, most of us stopped with the auction clock, as here in the US, okay, and went over to category management, account management, all these modern terms, of which I'm very familiar because I come out of the fast-moving industry, fast-moving consumer goods industry. In our industry, that was relatively new. But while we in the Netherlands were moving to, say, the right-hand part, and I'll explain this chart a little bit more in a minute, in Belgium, they were loyal to the auction clock, and they've never changed it. Up until today, in Belgium, about 95% of everything that's been produced in Belgium, and they're also famous for making strawberries, is auctioned. Still today, only a relatively small portion is done. And like the Dutch, they're also export-oriented, not to the same extent, but it's quite similar. There are some differences between the Dutch market and the Dutch cooperatives and the Belgian one, but it was very interesting. What was also interesting is that more than 100 million of product of growers went to Belgium. Not physically, because they still grow in harvest in the Netherlands, but they left the Dutch auctions because they didn't feel that in this way of working with account management and category management was serving them well enough. They were unhappy about it. And so they moved to Belgium, and now they are auctioning and selling their product through the Belgian cooperatives rather than the Dutch ones. And so when I joined ZON about 2 years ago, I had to look into what was happening and how that worked. And I came up with, together with my team, about this chart, which basically trying to do two things. One is saying, what type of supplier are you, or do you want to be? On the other hand, how well do you want to know your customer? And what then are the kind of activities that you need to develop and do very well? And then, what kind of sales mechanisms or sales instruments are available? Now, basically you can divide it in two parts, and I will say just through the middle. On the left-hand side, you find more what is transactional driven. The old-fashioned, we grow as growers, you cooperative sell it for me. Whereas on the right-hand side, where you come into account management, category management, and even co-makership, in which you as a supplier are jointly responsible for making sure that the shelf has the right product, has the right volume, etc., etc. You're very much involved in to develop all kinds of promotions, developed in all kinds of innovations, very much tailored to the need of your customer. On the left-hand side, you basically, it's much more in transactional services, and it's about the right product, and the price is determined. In the left-hand side, we realized that the auction clock was a better instrument for our growers than selling directly to customers or doing through trading, in which there is a one-on-one relationship, as Jim explained, in which the product in the morning is sold to buyers who would call us, if they would not go to the auction, call us and ask and trying to negotiate a transaction for so many tomatoes today and tomorrow, or tomorrow. So very much we realized that for the day trade, it was far more efficient to go back to the auction clock, and that's exactly what we did. So we moved back, reinstalled the auction clock in end of 2014 and start of 2015, and at the time, we did still have an auction clock, but we didn't really treat it very well. We only gave product to it if we couldn't sell it, so it was not reliable. The buyers were not very happy about it. But then we've decided to stop with all transaction day trading. So no longer, if buyers would call us in the morning, could get product through a deal made with my salespeople. If they wanted to buy for the day, they had to go to the auction. Initially, we had a lot of opposition. Not just from the buyers, because they were unhappy about it, they didn't want to go back to the auction clock, but also from our colleagues. Because what we did, we created an open market and a transparent market, and the prices would be published every day, and everybody would be seeing what it is. I can tell you in 2 years now, initially we did about 25% of our volume. Last year we did about 40%, and this year we will do more than 50% of our volume via the auction clock. And so we regard it as a big success, especially as our growers are very happy, because now they have a choice. They can either go with the auction clock, if they think that's the right way for them to do business, the right way how they want to operate their own enterprise and how to deal with us, or we also offer all kinds of other activities more in line with what I was used to in fast-moving consumer goods. Category management, marketing activity, PR, very much focused on customers, developing new products for customers, etc., etc., etc. Something you're undoubtedly very familiar with. And that's been a great move, having this dual strategy, offering our growers, which as you know are a very diversified group by now, both sides. And what you see is that and then what you see today is it's not necessarily that only the bigger growers will tend to go to the marketing and sales activities. Also bigger growers, particularly when they have more like a commodity, like bell peppers, they tend to go to the auction clock because there's some benefits to it. But if you're really much more in a niche product, you probably not end up at our marketplace with our auction clock. And if you're a very big grower, and you have a more specialized product, like the tomato growers I was talking about, you very much end up with that part of our organization in which we facilitate the growers with all kinds of activities to make sure that the product is with the customers, usually being retail customers in the Netherlands and in Germany. So, since then we have attracted new growers, because, as I said, a lot of the growers had gone to Belgium, and from some of our colleagues, there is a lot of interest of joining us and bringing in more volume. We've seen a lot more transactions, and we've seen more buyers. We've grown more buyers, and remarkably or not, some of the opposition we had, these traders are also buying today on our auction clock, because we developed it in a good way, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have also developed all kinds of services to make sure that the buyers are being served in the right way. And we realized very good prices. And it's true, in a time in which there is kind of shortage of product, the auction clock does a better job. But for the last 2 years, the prices we've realized for our growers are within the top 3 of about 17 competitors. And most of the times, our prices have been very good. And what we've started last year, and we've continued to do this year, is work with Spanish cooperatives. So now Spanish cooperatives bring product to us and sell it through our auction clock, next to bringing it also to some other customers in the region. So we can now offer a year-round supply for our customers, which is very important. If I look for the benefits for the growers, and that's where I'm working for, there's 3 things. They like the price being transparent. There's no human intervention. It's not because the buyer or the trader like each other. There's nothing about it. It's not because, well, you need to help me today because I'm going to buy a lot from you next week. None of it. The price is whatever it is. It's cost efficient. Commercial people are much more expensive than my auction masters. My auction masters don't need a mobile phone, don't have a company car, and usually their salary is much lower, and they do by themselves in 3 hours, where I normally would need about 10 traders. So it's cost efficient, which is right for the growers because they pay less in cost. And it gives higher prices during shortness. A couple of times a year, that's always been the case, prices go up because there's shortage, for whatever reason. Because of the rain, because of the sunshine, because of some other things. In these times, we more than when in the trading part profit from the prices going up, and so our growers are happy with that. What is key that we found in the last 2 years is that we must treat the clock as a customer. So we must make sure that we are reliable as what we put in front of the clock, reliable in terms of quality, reliable in terms of assortment, and reliable in terms of the services we offer. And if we do that, we see our buyers coming back, and we're seeing attracting more buyers, and I think that's been the key of what we've done. So overall, we are very happy, but more importantly, a part of our growers are very happy with the reinstallment of the auction clock, and we will certainly further develop that, and we're looking forward to welcome more growers and more buyers. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Hi, Craig Carlson again. Where do you see this going in the future? And is there going to be other platforms out there that could expand into this? There are some here in the U.S. that are being launched as we speak. That a lot, it's called NGB Markets that's doing something like this. What are your perspectives here?
Yeah, I honestly believe that out of the total volume, the majority will be sold directly to customers, so it will be on the right-hand side of our strategy. This is basically, I think, anywhere between 15 to 20% of the total volume will be auctioned, and also think in the future. We are currently developing and thinking and working with university to develop new tools which will be more interactive and will possibly also be able to reach out to other other buyers, and possibly on longer term also to consumers. So we really believe that this auctioning and everything we're doing can be a platform for future developments. And it's early days. We believe that within the next 5 years the opportunities will exist. If not, I'm very sure, others will step into that opportunity. If you already look in China, what can be done directly from the e-retailing to consumers, also with vegetables, I believe that we should be very serious about investigating and seeing the opportunities there, because if we don't do, I'm sure somebody else will.
One more question?
Diogo Monteiro from Newcastle University. So one of the key issues in here is really the standardization of the product, right? Because one of the reasons why we have the direct sort of customer retail is actually the agency that comes with us. So we need to be certain that the product indeed has that element, right? So how do you assure that?
Sorry.
And how might that actually threaten the evolution of this market?
Sorry, I don't get your question exactly. What?
Well,
Lower your microphone.
sorry. The question is really, for this to be successful, you need consistency and standardization of
Yep.
that price, right?
Yeah.
Which, basically you eliminate, so with auctions it becomes anonymous, right? Which was one of the reasons why we had the
Sure.
evolution. So that is a threat, potentially, isn't it?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, as I already said, I believe that for a portion of the market, the auction clock is a good instrument. And I will also say that not every day and not every period, it will always give the best prices. So, yeah, I think you have to accept that. But that is true for anything you do in life, unfortunately. As soon as you found the Holy Grail, somebody else finds a bigger one. So, you have to deal with that. But the important thing with us, and that's been the thing that we've been basically spending a lot of time on, is with our growers, to make them understand that despite the fact that they don't know who is buying their product at the auction clock itself is a customer. And so we should be doing and working with them very intensely to make sure that we do the offering in a consistent way, making sure that the clock and what we offer there is reliable. And that's a challenge. But working with growers is always a challenge. Whatever you do, whether you go directly to the retailers or you do this. But yeah, that's the key. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.